Exercise 20-27, Production Cost Report, Part 2. So we're doing the production cost report for the second department. In this case, the department is the bottling department. And we've already done the equivalent units in the previous video. So now we're going to work on the costs. So go ahead and open up the data table here. It'll pop up. I've shrunk this one down so we can see our table that we're filling out here on the left. So remember, looking at the T accounts, we're going to start with the costs to account for. And those are the costs that are in the beginning balance associated with these 12,000 units and the units transferred in the 163,000 units. So our labels are going to be, remember, we're working on costs to account for, so it's the beginning work in process and the costs added during the period. And in this case, since it's the second department, the costs added were just the ones that came out of the filtering department and into this bottling department. So those are the 163,000 units. But now we're working on costs, so we need to go up here to our cost section and get the beginning work in process costs for the transferred in units. So those units here, those 12,000 units, cost us $1,700 there. So we'll go ahead and enter a label of beginning work in process for $1,700. And then direct materials was 0. And it's 0. Why? Because these were at the beginning of the process and they were not finished. And remember, in this bottling process that we have, the materials are not added until the end of the process. So then 0 direct materials will have been used. So we can go ahead to 0. And then next up we have our conversion costs for the beginning work in process. So those are going to be the direct labor and the manufacturing overhead added together. So that's that $700 plus $330. So that is going to be $1,030. And we can go ahead and add these costs together for the total cost for the beginning work in process here. And that is $2,730. So $2,730. So next we have the costs added during the period. So these are the production started right here, this row. So here again are the units, however here are the costs after. So we can go ahead and get these in. So for transferred in, we have 134,800. So we can go ahead and enter that in. Direct materials is going to be here for 30,400. And then for conversion costs, that's that direct labor plus manufacturing overhead. So if we add those together, that is going to be 49,400. And then add all three, the transferred in, direct materials, and conversion costs. And that is going to give us a total of 214,600. So then for the total cost to account for, that's just some addition here. So add each of these columns here. So 1,700 plus the 134,800, that is 136,500. And then this one plus 0, so it just stays 30,400 for the direct materials. For conversion costs, it's going to be 50,430. And then total costs added together is going to be 217,330. So next up, we need to divide by total EUP, equivalent units of production. So notice for this column transferred in, that's the one we're looking at, and that it matches when we scroll back up. So for transferred in, that is going to be that 175,000 units, total units accounted for there. So we're going to go ahead and bring that down. So 175,000 for transferred in. And then for direct materials, scroll back up here, make sure it matches direct materials, 152,000. Then conversion costs. Let's have a look up here. That's that 168,100. Just double checking that it does say conversion costs here. So 168,100. Bring that down. And then we have to the cost per equivalent unit. So how we do that is take this total cost to account for and then divide it by the equivalent units of production here below. So for the first one for transferred in, that's going to be 136,500 divided by 175,000. So we can go ahead and get that in our calculator. So 136,500 divided by 175,000, and that's going to give us 0.78. Rounded to 2 digits. And then we're going to move on to the direct materials here. And that's going to be that 30,400 divided by 152,000. So this number here, total costs to account for, divided by the EUP here. So that is going to equal 0.20. So we are rounding to 2 digits there. And then we have conversion costs. So we're going to take 50,430 divided by 168,100. So this number divided by this number. And that is going to give us 0.30 for the 2 digits there. We will shrink this down, close out of this, and check our answer. Good job. Okay, so now we have to figure out our costs accounted for. So remember, costs accounted for are the units transferred out and the ones still in the ending balance. So the labels are going to be units completed and transferred out and ending work in process. So now we need to calculate the costs accounted for the completed and transferred out. So how we're going to do that is we're going to go back up here to the first portion of our problem to the units accounted for, and we're going to go to transferred in, and we have this completed and transferred out, which is what we're working on below, for 152,000 units, and we're going to multiply this 152,000 units by this in cost per equivalent unit of 78 cents. So we'll go ahead and do that here. Get our calculator out. So that's 152,000 times 0.78. And that is going to give us 118,560. So we'll go ahead and enter in that answer here for the completed and transferred out costs for transferred in. And then we're going to do the same here for the direct materials as this last one. We're going to scroll back up, make sure we're looking at direct materials, and the completed and transferred out for direct materials was 152,000. So we will use 152,000 and scroll back down here to this 20 cents for direct materials for the cost per equivalent unit and multiply that again by 0.20. So for 20 cents. And so that is 30,400 here for the materials. Let's go ahead and enter that in and repeat again for the conversion costs. So scroll back up. We're looking at conversion costs. The completed and transferred out was this 152,000 again. So we have 152,000. And then for the conversion cost per equivalent unit is 30 cents. So we'll multiply this by 0.30. And that's going to give us 45,600. Go ahead and enter that in. Here we're in the costs here. And then we have our total cost at the end. So we can go ahead and add all this completed and transferred out cost together. And that is going to give us a total of 194,560. And then these costs accounted for the ending work in process, we're going to rinse and repeat what we just did, but instead for the ending work in process units up above. So let's go ahead and take a look here. So units accounted for, ending work in process, and make sure we're looking at transferred in, which is what we're working on first. So that's 23,000. and that's going to be multiplied by that 0.78. So we can go ahead and take 23,000 times 78 cents, and that's going to give us 17,940. And clear that out. And for the direct materials, let's go back up here. So direct materials, ending work in process is 0. So what do we do with that? So that's 0 times 0.020, so times 20 cents, so that ends up being 0. So then we can go to conversion costs, and we'll make sure we're working under conversion costs for the equivalent units here, and that is 16,100. So go ahead and type in 16,100 and apply that by the 30 cents here for the conversion costs, cost per equivalent unit. So that's 16,100 times 0.30. And that gives us 4,830. And then go ahead and add this ending work in process to get the total costs here. And then that is going to be 22,770. So now we need the total costs accounted for, so we just add the completed and transferred out cost to the ending work in process cost. So we'll go ahead and add those through. So that's going to give us 136,500 here for the transferred in. Then direct materials is next, and that is 30,400. And then conversion costs, and that is going to give us a total of 50,430. It looks like we're missing a number here. That was the 4,830 that we calculated before. Looks like it zeroed out there. And then for the total cost accounted for the total cost, we just add these guys this way, and that is going to give us 217,330. So let's go ahead and close out of our calculator and check our answer. Good job. Okay. So to review, what this means is that these costs that were transferred out, the total cost for those are these 194,560 completed and transferred out there. And for these units that are still in process, these 23,000 units, the costs associated with that are 22,770, because that's the ending work in process that they're hanging out in. So that's the main purpose of doing the production cost report, is to figure out how much cost we should associate with the cost transferred out for finished items or in process items, and how much costs are associated with the incomplete units still in the process. So in the last video, we'll finish the problem by doing the journal entry, and then we'll post all the transactions of the work in process inventory to account. But that is it for now. Thank you.